When people think of Canada, they immediately picture its wealthy cities, world-renowned tourist destinations, and some of the most breathtaking natural landscapes on the planet. And Toronto, one of the greatest symbols of that very image. Modern, crowded, prosperous. Not only is it Canada's largest economic media and entertainment hub, but Toronto these days has also become the focal point of attention as politics in the city and across the entire province of Ontario begin to heat up ahead of the 2026 elections. Facing pressure from a massive influx of tourists, along with the enormous costs of hosting and upgrading infrastructure, Toronto is preparing to welcome the biggest event in the city's modern history, the 2026 FIFA World Cup. And yet it's still Toronto, but a completely different world. Homeless people everywhere. Rent prices rising non-stop, food getting more expensive, gas prices climbing and heavy inflation pressure. The cost of living has now gone far beyond what many ordinary working people can afford. Toronto is currently the city facing the most severe cost of living pressure in all of Canada. You know what's scary? There are international students forced to sleep in their cars. There are new immigrants who came to Canada full of hope for a better life, only to find themselves trapped in a city they can no longer afford to live in. And then everything starts appearing right on the streets. Tents are popping up more and more around downtown, near subway stations, under overpasses, in public parks. Shelters are nearly full every winter night. Fentanyl is spreading across the streets. Overdoses are happening in public restrooms, on the TTC, and inside temporary shelters.
I have an addiction. I smoke crack cocaine on a regular basis. So I stay up for many, many days. So I travel towards this circuit at the end of the day. But people are like this by nature. The drugs just intensify it. Remember that, right?
What's worth noting is, this is no longer just the story of a group of people living on the margins of society. It's happening to the ordinary working class itself. And that's exactly why more and more people are starting to ask one big question. What is it really happening to Toronto? Keep following to find out the answer. According to homelessness statistics in Toronto, there are 12,196 homeless people in the city. Across the entire province of Ontario, this number has risen to approximately 85,000 people, an 8% increase compared to 2024. Even after urgently adding more beds for the winter, shelters are still forced to turn away 40 to 50 desperate people every single night. While city leaders praise themselves for the reduction in the number of temporary tents and parks, people continue to die on the streets and in temporary shelters. In 2025, the temporary shelters in Toronto alone recorded 59 deaths, exactly the same heartbreaking number as in 2024. Opioid poisoning remains the leading cause of death.
On that front, and we know that some of the changes that have been made are because of activist pressure, because of pressure from homeless people themselves, because of pressure from people who do care about the issue in the city and make calls and ask for change. But absent real hard push for change, we don't really see the will to make the deep systemic changes that would be required.
Data from Toronto Public Health in recent years shows that drug poisoning accounts for more than half of all reported deaths, with hundreds of people dying each year. How many more bodies will it take before we call this by its true name, a slow-motion disaster? These are not just statistics. These are fathers, mothers, and children who have been abandoned while the system beats its chest and congratulates itself for having cleaner parks. Social assistance only pays out $733 a month, while the cheapest available room now costs $860. Over the past few years, housing rents have skyrocketed, while wages have barely increased at all. Meanwhile, developers continue to build million-dollar condos that most local residents will never be able to live in. And yes, people are starting to ask a serious question: who exactly is this city being built for anymore? Because right now, Toronto feels like a city designed for investors, not for ordinary people. And those signs are everywhere. What if the progress being praised is nothing more than a dangerous illusion? Some people are couch surfing at others' homes. Some are living in their cars. Others are working 2 or 3 jobs just to survive. This isn't happening in some forgotten corner of Canada. This is downtown Toronto, one of the wealthiest urban centers in North America. Do you know what that says? The system isn't struggling. It is failing the people right before our eyes. But no matter who people choose to criticize, one thing is crystal clear: the gap between the rich and everyone else is widening in a brutal and relentless way.
And the fact that I am an opiate user, some of the cuts that are in the fentanyl would make me pass out. And anytime I would pass out, people would just go in my pockets, steal my phone, steal all my stuff.
The housing crisis is only part of the story. What is happening on the streets of Toronto right now runs far deeper than just skyrocketing rents. And to be honest, this is what leaves so many people feeling deeply uneasy. Toronto's crisis isn't just about housing anymore. That's the part a lot of people outside Canada still don't fully understand. The city isn't only dealing with rising rent or crowded shelters. It's also facing a rapidly growing mental health and drug crisis that's become impossible to ignore. And honestly, downtown feels different now. You see it near TTC stations, around shelters, inside public washrooms, and encampments hidden behind parks and underpasses. More and more residents say they're seeing people in visible distress almost every day. Emergency crews respond constantly in some parts of the city. Outreach workers carry naloxone kits the same way paramedics carry medical gear, because they know they'll probably need them before the night is over. That alone tells you how serious things have become. But here's the part that often gets lost online. This story is not just about drugs. It's about trauma, isolation, PTSD, untreated mental illness, years of instability stacking on top of each other until people completely fall through the cracks. Many of the people struggling on Toronto's streets today have histories of abuse, severe stress, family breakdown, or long-term mental health challenges. And meanwhile, support systems are overwhelmed, understaffed, or simply too slow to respond, so eventually the streets become the fallback system. And that's where the conversation gets uncomfortable, because some residents feel the city has become too tolerant of the crisis. Others argue Toronto still isn't doing nearly enough to help vulnerable people recover safely, The debate keeps getting louder. But while politicians argue and agencies struggle to keep up, regular people are adapting to scenes that would have shocked the city just a few years ago. That may be the most disturbing part of all. Not that the crisis exists, but how normal it's starting to feel. The financial hit is just as brutal. Toronto spends roughly $51,000 per homeless person per year on shelter services and emergency care. That's more than the median after-tax income for many working Canadians. Multiply that across 12,000 plus people in the city, and you're looking at hundreds of millions funneled into a system that still turns people away every night. Taxpayers foot the bill for emergency rooms, police calls, and temporary beds, yet the root problem keeps growing. It's not compassion, it's an expensive failing cycle that drains public resources without delivering lasting fixes. And who pays the highest price? The most vulnerable groups. Ontario's 2025 figures show around 20,000 children and youth experiencing homelessness province-wide. That's kids sleeping rough or bouncing between overcrowded shelters instead of going to school. Indigenous people, who make up a tiny fraction of the population, account for a massively disproportionate share, roughly 11,000 in Ontario in 2025, up sharply from previous years. Systemic barriers, intergenerational trauma, and lack of culturally appropriate support keep hammering this community hardest. Women and gender-diverse individuals face especially savage risks. The median age of death for homeless women in Toronto has plunged to just 36 years old in recent data, decades younger than the general population. Many die from toxic drug poisoning and unsafe conditions, often avoiding mixed shelters due to fear of violence. Seniors are another fast-growing group aging out on the streets with failing health and nowhere stable to land. Mental health struggles and addiction weave through almost every story, turning survival into a daily gamble. Here's the controversial truth too many avoid. We're pouring serious money into managing symptoms, while the structural failures, sky-high rents, pitiful social assistance rates, and fragmented support keep manufacturing new victims. Clearing encampments might look like action on camera, but when people simply scatter into hidden corners and keep dying, it's not progress. It's displacement dressed up as policy. This hidden human and financial toll exposes a system stretched to its breaking point. Toronto isn't just failing to house people, it's failing to keep them alive. The question isn't whether the crisis is expensive. Downtown Toronto changes after midnight. And honestly, that's when the city starts showing its real face. The financial district is still glowing. Condos stay lit up across the skyline. But down at street level, the mood shifts fast. TTC stations get quieter. Sirens echo through empty intersections. Shelter lineups start forming before the temperature even drops overnight. And in narrow alleyways behind restaurants and office towers, some people are still searching for food bottles, or simply a place to stay warm until morning. Here's the unsettling part: most of this happens in plain sight. Not hidden, not underground. Right in the middle of one of North America's richest cities. Late at night, downtown Toronto feels split into two completely different worlds. One side is nightlife money, luxury condos, ride shares, late night bars. The other side is survival. People wrapped in blankets near subway entrances. Outreach workers moving block to block. Tents tucked behind fences and under overpasses while freezing wind cuts through the streets. And after a while, residents start getting used to it. That's what makes the situation so disturbing. Because when a city sees the same crisis every single night, eventually people stop reacting. The sirens become background noise. Shelter lines become normal. Someone sleeping outside a bank tower barely gets a second glance anymore. And honestly, I think that says more about Toronto's condition than any statistic ever could. This isn't the collapse of a poor city. That's what makes it controversial. Toronto is wealthy, modern, globally connected, yet somehow more and more people are struggling just to survive the night downtown. And maybe the biggest warning sign is this: the crisis no longer feels temporary, it feels permanent. The system in Toronto isn't just under pressure anymore, it's clearly struggling to keep up. And honestly, a lot of residents feel like the city has been reacting to the crisis instead of getting ahead of it. Shelters across Toronto are overcrowded almost every night. Staff are burned out. Funding is stretched thin. In winter, some locations hit capacity before midnight, leaving people with nowhere else to go. Meanwhile, demand keeps rising faster than the city can respond, and that's where things start getting ugly. Because affordable housing in Toronto simply isn't being built fast enough. Luxury condos keep going up across downtown, yet affordable units remain limited and painfully slow to develop. As rent prices continue climbing, more low-income residents, newcomers, students, and even full-time workers are falling into unstable housing situations. So naturally, shelters become the backup system for problems they were never designed to handle long-term. But housing is only part of it. Toronto's mental health system is also facing serious strain. Many people dealing with severe anxiety trauma, PTSD, or addiction are stuck waiting months for proper treatment or support. Outreach teams are overwhelmed. Recovery programs are limited. And in many cases, people only receive help after they've already hit rock bottom. That's what frustrates so many people. Some residents believe the government focuses too much on clearing encampments and cleaning public spaces instead of fixing the deeper causes behind the crisis. Others argue the city is already spending billions and still falling behind. Either way, public trust is clearly wearing down. And honestly, when a wealthy city starts normalizing overcrowded shelters, untreated mental illness, and people surviving block by block downtown, it stops looking like a temporary crisis. It starts looking like systemic failure. Toronto is still growing every single day. New condo towers continue rising across the skyline. Downtown remains brightly lit all night long. Major corporations, investors, and thousands of immigrants still arrive in the city hoping for a better life. But at the exact same time, more and more people are being left behind. And maybe the most disturbing part is not that this crisis exists, but that people are slowly getting used to it. A city is not judged only by the towers it builds or the wealth it creates. In the end, the true measure of a city is how it treats the people who have nowhere left to go. And right now, Toronto is being forced to confront that very question.